Sign the house over or I tell everyone you're barren. That was the voicemail. My husband's voice, 41 seconds long, left on a landline in 2014 at a title company in Fort Collins, Colorado. Nobody listened to that landline for 10 years. The receptionist who took it quit 3 days later. Her replacement kept the tape in a drawer because the voicemail machine was broken and nobody wanted to deal with it. I found it on a Tuesday. October. I was 42. The title company was closing its satellite office. They were cleaning out. A woman named Tamsin called me because my maiden name was on a file box, and she wanted to know if I wanted the contents before they shredded it. I'm Marlo Petrakis. I said yes because I don't throw anything away. That's just how I am. Inside the box there was a cassette, handwritten label, my husband's name, and the word voicemail and a date. October 14th, 2014. I was 20 weeks pregnant on October 14th, 2014. I lost that baby on October 19th. I drove home with the cassette on the passenger seat. I sat in the driveway of our house, the house, for 40 minutes before I went inside. My husband Dimitri was grilling salmon on the back deck, laughing at something on his phone. Through the window, his laugh looked rehearsed. He called out, "Babe, you want rice or couscous?" I said couscous. I went upstairs. I plugged a borrowed cassette player into the bathroom outlet. I locked the door. And I listened to my husband tell a lawyer he needed me to sign the house over before my miscarriage was confirmed, because once I was a documented failure, I'd have leverage, and leverage was expensive. Then I flushed the toilet so he'd think I'd been peeing. I came downstairs and ate the couscous. He had no idea the next 87 days of his life were already scheduled. My name is Marlo Petrakis, and I work as a finance manager at a car dealership off College Avenue in Fort Collins. I know. The least glamorous job in America. I sit in a little glass office and I push extended warranties and gap insurance on people who just want to drive home in a Subaru. I'm good at it. I've been doing it for 16 years. I can read a credit report the way some people read poetry. That's the detail everyone underestimates about me. Dimitri underestimated it for 11 years of marriage. My mother-in-law called it Marlo's little counting job. My sister-in-law Antigone once introduced me at a party as the one who does the paperwork. Everyone assumed that because I smiled through it, I didn't hear it. I heard everything. I remember everything. My grandmother, Yia, used to say, "A quiet woman is not an empty woman. She is a lake, and lakes drown men who don't respect the shore." She said that to me the summer I was 9, on the porch of her house in Pueblo, while she shelled peas into a colander between her knees. I remember the sound the peas made, the soft tick of each one against tin, a metronome of patience. I remember the smell of her porch, which was lemon oil and old cedar, and the faint, sharp ghost of cigarettes she'd quit 30 years earlier. I remember the splinters in the railing I ran my thumb across because I wanted to feel something while she talked. I didn't understand her sentence then. I filed it away. That's what I do with things. I file them. I grew up the middle of 3 girls. My older sister Avanthia was the shining one. Pre-med, then med school, then cardiologist. My younger sister Callie was the pretty one, got married at 22 to a dentist, 2 boys by 26. I was the middle one, the one who kept track, the one who remembered birthdays and paid for Yia's hearing aids when Mom forgot and drove 2 hours to Pueblo every other Sunday because somebody had to. I met Dimitri at a wedding in 2011. His cousin married my college roommate. He wore a navy suit. He danced with my grandmother first before he danced with me, which I thought meant something. It did mean something, just not what I thought. He was a commercial real estate broker, handsome in a way that photographed better than it lived. He said all the right things on the first 6 dates, and by the 8th date, I was already picturing a kitchen we didn't own yet. We married in 2013 at a vineyard in Palisade. Yia walked me down the aisle because my father had died that spring. She squeezed my hand and said, "Count the exits before you sit down." I thought she meant the ceremony. I laughed. I should have looked. There were signs. I'll tell you about them so you know I'm not stupid. I'm just loyal in a way that's adjacent to stupid. 6 months in, his phone started sleeping face down on the nightstand. 8 months in, he stopped letting me use his laptop for Netflix. A year in, we opened a joint account, and he insisted on keeping a separate one for business expenses. I said, okay. I was raised to say, okay. The thing about my job, the thing nobody took seriously, is that I spent every day watching people lie about money. Couples come into my glass office, and one of them doesn't know about the 3 credit cards the other one has. I can smell it across the desk. It smells, if you've never noticed, like the inside of a wallet that's been in a back pocket too long. Warm leather, old receipts, sweat. By 2014, I could smell it at my own kitchen table. I just didn't want to. That Tuesday in October 2024 changed things. But the real story started in 2014, 10 years before I heard the voicemail. And you need to know what 2014 was like in my marriage because that's where the plot was already moving. It just took a decade for the evidence to catch up. That summer, I was 20 weeks pregnant with a girl I'd already named Thea, after Iya, whose full name was Theodora. Dmitri hated the name. He wanted Astrid. We had fought about it twice. Theodora. He'd said, "No daughter of mine is going to be named after a woman who smells like mothballs." I remember that sentence the way you remember a burn. On October 14th, I went to a routine appointment. I was alone. Dmitri was in Denver for a showing. The ultrasound tech got quiet. Then she got a doctor. Then the doctor said words I can repeat verbatim. "I'm not finding a heartbeat, Marlowe." I was wearing a gray sweater and jeans. The exam table paper crinkled when I sat up. I bled through the jeans in the parking lot. Dmitri picked up on the 4th ring. He said, "I'm mid-conversation, babe. Can it wait?" I said no. He came home 6 hours later. What I didn't know until I played that cassette in my bathroom in 2024 was that he had gone straight from my phone call to a lawyer's office in Cheyenne, not Denver, Cheyenne. He left a voicemail for that lawyer at 4:47 p.m. on October 14th, 2014, from the lawyer's landline, on hold. The landline that accidentally recorded everything when you were on hold more than 20 seconds, because the firm used a cheap system from 2003. In that voicemail, Dmitri said, and I'm quoting it because I have listened to it so many times I could type it in my sleep, "She's going to lose the kid. The doctor basically told her, I need you to draft the quitclaim on the Elkhorn house before the week's out. Tell her it's estate planning. She'll sign. She's fragile. If she balks, I'll tell her family she's barren. She cares what they think more than what I think. That'll move her." He laughed. Then he said, "Honestly, I married the wrong sister. The pretty one was taken." Then he hung up. Then the landline's voicemail system stored the whole thing because the lawyer never picked up. Because the lawyer was in the bathroom, because life is absurd. The tape sat in a drawer for 10 years. I sat on my bathroom floor that October night in 2024, and I didn't cry. I want you to understand that. I didn't cry. I had cried every single night for 6 weeks in 2014. I had used up my crying. The tile was cold against the backs of my thighs. The grout smelled faintly of bleach. I'd cleaned it that Saturday, on my knees, while Dmitri watched football. What I did instead of crying was I opened the Notes app on my phone and I started a list. Item 1, cassette. Item 2, Elkhorn house deed. Pull from county records. Item 3, separate account. Find the number. Item 4, Ya's ring. I came downstairs. Dmitri had plated the couscous. He said, "You look tired, babe." I said, "Long day." He kissed my forehead. His mouth was dry. I smiled. Here's what I hadn't told you yet. The house I was living in, the one Dmitri grilled salmon on the deck of, the one I'd paid the mortgage on for 9 years out of my little counting job, was not in my name. Hadn't been since 2014. I'd signed a document that December, 2 months after I lost Thea, that Dmitri told me was a refinance. I was on Lexapro. I was on Ambien. I was barely eating. I signed what he put in front of me. I trusted him because trusting him was cheaper than the alternative. The document was a quitclaim. I signed the house to him, sole owner. I learned that in 2018, when I pulled our records for a haylock, and the loan officer, a woman named Bridget with a pearl necklace and kind eyes, said gently, "Honey, this house isn't in your name. Did you know that?" I'd said, "There must be a mistake." She said, "There's no mistake. It was reassigned in December 2014. I went home that night and I asked Dimitri. He said, and this is one of his signature moves, so pay attention because he does it again later. Marlo, you're remembering wrong. You were really sick that year. Your memory from that time is not reliable. I took care of things. Do you want me to dig up the paperwork? It'll upset you. I said no. I said no because saying no was cheaper than saying yes. But I started keeping a folder. A physical folder, in a filing cabinet at my office at the dealership, behind a drawer full of dead customer files. Nobody opened that drawer but me. It smelled, when I pulled it out, like the particular dust of old toner and the peppermints Bobby stashed in the back. A clerical, almost comforting smell. In that folder, I kept copies of every document I could get my hands on. Bank statements he left on the counter. Receipts from his wallet when he showered. The occasional credit card bill that came to the house by mistake. I didn't have a plan. I just had the folder. That's the hidden part of me Dimitri never clocked. I'm a finance manager. I can read a paper trail the way a tracker reads mud. And I never throw anything away. By 2022, the folder was 3 inches thick. By 2023, it was 5. I also, in 2019, started recording phone calls. Colorado is a one-party consent state. I looked it up at work on my lunch break, eating a turkey sandwich from the deli across the parking lot. I downloaded an app. I recorded every financial conversation I ever had with my husband after that. Every one. Hundreds of hours. He never knew. He'd say things like, "Baby, if anything happens to me, you won't know where to find the accounts. Let me just handle it." And I'd say, "Okay, sweetheart." And I'd upload the audio to a cloud drive my sister Evanthea set up for me under her Gmail. Evanthea knew. Knew before she died in 2021. Callie did not. Callie was in love with Dimitri in a low-grade, smiling way that I had stopped caring about. Back to October 2024. Back to the cassette. The morning after I listened to it, I called in sick to the dealership. I drove to my sister Evanthea's condo in Boulder. I played her the cassette on her kitchen island on a boombox she keeps for reasons I've never asked about. She listened with her arms crossed. When it ended, she said one sentence. "I'm going to call Petra." Petra Ionescu is Evanthea's college roommate. Petra is a divorce attorney in Denver who once made a hedge fund manager cry in a deposition so hard he threw up in a trash can. Evanthea introduced us over brunch in 2020. Petra had given me her card. I'd kept it in my wallet for 4 years, behind my library card. I'd never used it. I just liked knowing it was there. Petra met with me that Saturday in her office on the 17th floor of a building downtown. She wore a black turtleneck and silver earrings shaped like blades. She listened to the cassette. She read my folder, all 5 inches. She asked me 12 questions, each one more specific than the last. At the end, she said, "Marlo, I need you to not do anything impulsive for 6 weeks. Can you do that?" I said yes. She said, "And I need you to make him comfortable, more comfortable than he's ever been. He needs to think you're finally the woman he trained you to be." I said yes, she said, "And I need a list of everyone in his family who hates him, even a little." I said, "Give me a notebook." The list was longer than either of us expected. Okay, so now, let me tell you about the escalation. Because the 6 weeks Petra asked me for turned into 12 weeks, and those 12 weeks were the worst and best weeks of my life. The worst because I had to keep sleeping next to him. The best because every single day I was building the thing that would end him. Week 1. Dimitri came home from a client dinner at 11:40 p.m., smelling like a perfume I didn't own. Tom Ford. Specifically, Black Orchid. I know because I work in a place where rich women get out of Audis, smelling like their regrets. I said, "How was dinner?" He said, "Exhausting. The guy wouldn't shut up about cap rates." I said, "Poor baby." I made him chamomile tea. I put honey in it. He kissed my cheek. I smiled until my face hurt. Week 2. His phone buzzed on the counter while he was in the shower. I didn't touch it. I photographed the screen. The preview said, "Miss you already. Tuesday? A." I went to the closet and looked at his suits. The navy one was missing. He was wearing the navy one on Tuesdays now. A. Astrid? No, 2 on the nose. Turned out to be Antonella, his assistant, 26. Blonde in a way you buy. I'll get to her. Week 3. My mother-in-law, Despina, came over for Sunday dinner. She brought her signature disapproval and a pan of pasticcio. Halfway through dinner, she looked at me and said, Marlo, dear, have you thought about hormone therapy? A friend of mine had miraculous results. Obviously, it's too late for the child question, but for your skin. Dimitri laughed. I want you to understand that. He laughed. I said, Despina, what a thoughtful suggestion. I'll look into it. Then I excused myself to the bathroom and I stared at myself in the mirror for 3 minutes, and I practiced smiling. Then I came back and ate pasticcio. It was delicious. Despina is a monster and a very good cook. Week 4, I found a rental receipt in Dimitri's jacket pocket for a storage unit in Loveland, Colorado. $94 a month, paid for 3 years. I'd never heard of this storage unit. I wrote the address in my phone and kept going. Week 5. Antonella came to a company holiday party Dimitri dragged me to. She wore a red dress that cost more than my car payment. She shook my hand. Her nails were perfect. She said, You must be so proud of Dimitri. He works so hard. I said, He really does. I held her gaze for 3 seconds longer than was comfortable. She broke first. On her left ring finger was a gold band with a small emerald set in an antique filigree setting. I knew that ring. I knew every groove in that ring. That ring belonged to my grandmother. Yia had left it to me in 2021. I had kept it in a velvet box on my dresser. I had worn it once, to her funeral, and then I had put it away because I was afraid to lose it. It wasn't in the velvet box anymore. I said nothing. I smiled. I went to the bar. I ordered a gin and tonic. The bartender, a man named Reuben, and remember his name, said, You okay, ma'am? I said, Fantastic. Keep them coming. Week 6. I told Petra about the ring. I told her about the storage unit. I told her about Antonella. Petra wrote it all down. She said, Marlo, I need to tell you something. We pulled records. Your husband has a separate brokerage account at a firm in Cheyenne. Balance as of last Friday, $178,500. Opened in 2014. Funded consistently. You're not on it. Your name appears nowhere. I said, That's our missing down payment money from 3 houses we looked at and didn't buy. She said, Yes. I said, He always said the deals fell through. She said, Yes. I said, Okay. Week 7. The cruelest one. A Thursday. I'd had a bad day at work. A customer had screamed at me over a repossession and spit on my blouse. I came home early. I was upset. I was crying in the kitchen, quietly, with my back against the refrigerator. Dimitri walked in. He saw me. He did not ask what was wrong. He looked at me for a long beat, and he said, Marlo, you are genuinely exhausting. I don't know how much more of this I can take. You've been a leaky faucet for 11 years. Then he walked out the back door and drove to the gym. I sat on the kitchen floor, and I laughed. Actually laughed. Because he had no idea that the leaky faucet was a sprinkler system, and it was already wired to the whole house. Week 8. I drove to the storage unit in Loveland. I didn't have a key, but Petra had a P I named Dash, and Dash had a friend at the storage facility. Dash sent me photos. Inside the unit, 4 boxes. The storage. In those boxes, love letters to Antonella dating back to 2019, a lease agreement for an apartment in Cheyenne in both of their names, a passport with Dimitri's photo, and the name Dmitri Volkov Petrakis that had stamps in it from trips I thought he'd taken to Denver, and, this is the one, a framed photograph of my sister Callie from our engagement party in 2012, signed on the back. To Dimitri, you should have asked first. K. Callie, my little sister, the pretty one. I stopped eating for 2 days. Avanthia came and sat with me. She said, Marlo, not now. Not about Callie. Focus on the man. The man is the problem. Callie's a problem for a different afternoon. She was right. I ate a piece of toast. Week 9. I want to tell you about the night before Petra filed because I almost didn't. Dimitri came home late, humming. Actually humming. Something tuneless and pleased. He poured himself a bourbon, and he stood in the doorway of the kitchen, and he watched me unload the dishwasher. And he said, You know what I appreciate about you lately, Marlo? You've settled down. You've stopped making everything so dramatic. I said, Have I? He said, You have. It's a good look on you. Softer. Easier. I was starting to think we might actually make it to retirement. I put a coffee mug on the shelf. The ceramic clinked against its neighbor. I said, That's nice to hear, Dimitri. He said, Mom even said something. She said, Marlo's finally growing up. I defended you, by the way. I told her you'd always been mature. Just needed a little guidance. I said, That was generous of you. He said, I'm a generous guy. And he kissed the back of my neck, and he walked upstairs with his bourbon, humming, and I stood there with my hand on the shelf, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a decade. Not rage. Rage is fast. This was slower. This was the feeling of a lock finally turning after you'd been fighting it for years with the wrong key. I thought, he actually believes he won. He's going to sleep tonight, believing he has trained me, and I'm going to let him sleep on that belief for exactly one more night, and then I'm going to take it from him while he is still warm from it. I finished the dishwasher. I turned off the kitchen light. I went upstairs and I got into bed next to him and I listened to him snore for 7 hours, and I did not sleep, and I did not need to. Week 10. Petra filed. Here's where the money stops being about money and starts being about the shape of a life. I need to tell you what we did, because it matters. Petra used 3 things I had given her over the 8 weeks. The cassette, the $178,500 hidden account records, which we had obtained legally through a subpoena after Petra had just enough to justify one, and the quitclaim forgery on the Elkhorn house. Because it turned out, and this is the part that made Petra actually smile, which I had not seen her do before, that the quitclaim I signed in December 2014 had been notarized by a notary who had been suspended in 2015 for backdating documents. The notary was still alive. The notary was willing to testify. Dash, the PI, had found her in a trailer park in Greeley, and she had been waiting for 10 years for someone to ask. Petra walked into a judge's chambers on a Monday morning in late December with the cassette, the account statements, the notary affidavit, and a motion for an emergency court injunction to freeze every single asset in Dimitri's name, pending the divorce. She argued that he had demonstrated a pattern of fraud, concealment, and credible threat of further dissipation given the active affair and the out-of-state account. The judge signed it at 11:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. By 11:47 a.m., every account Dimitri touched was frozen. Checking, savings, the $178,500 in Cheyenne, his brokerage, the line of credit on the house that wasn't his to hold. His credit cards, one by one, started declining. The Mercedes lease, frozen. Credit card. His escrow at the real estate firm, frozen. At 12:04 p.m., he tried to buy lunch at a sushi place in downtown Fort Collins. Card declined. Tried another card. Declined. He called me. I didn't answer. He called his mother. She laughed. His mother laughed. I found this out later. She told him to ask Antonella for money. Then she hung up on him. At 12:38 p.m., he showed up at my work. I want you to picture this. I'm in my glass office. A customer named Mr. Halverson is sitting across from me signing a loan for a 2019 Forester. Dimitri barrels into the showroom in his wrinkled suit, face red, shouting my name. The general manager, a man named Bobby, who has known me since 2008 and who I once helped through his own divorce by loaning him my couch, walks out from the back and says, "Sir, you need to leave." Dimitri says, "That's my wife. I need to speak to my wife." I stand up. I walk to the glass door of my office. I open it. I say, "Dimitri, I have a customer. Petra will call you." He says, "Marlo, what have you done? What have you done?" I want to slow this moment down, because I have replayed it more times than I have replayed the cassette. He was standing under the fluorescent lights of a Subaru showroom in a suit he had not ironed. His hair was sticking up on one side. There was a drop of something, mustard maybe, on his lapel. This was the man who had told me, at a vineyard in Palisade, that he would protect me. This was the man who had laughed at his mother's barren joke. This was the man who had worn my grandmother's ring on another woman's hand. And he was asking me what I had done. I felt in that moment the strangest sensation. Not triumph. Triumph is loud, and I was quiet. It was more like the feeling of setting down a grocery bag you didn't realize was heavy until your arms came back up weightless. 11 years. 11 years of a weight I had called love because I didn't have another word for it. And here, under cheap lights, with Mr. for it. Halvorsen staring through my glass door and Bobby's hand near his radio, the weight simply left me. I felt my shoulders drop. I felt my jaw unclench. I felt the small muscles around my eyes, which had been bracing for a decade, soften. I thought of Yia Yia on the porch in Pueblo. I thought of the tick of peas on tin. I say, I've made you comfortable. And then I close the door and I sit down and I turn to Mr. Halvorsen and I say, I'm so sorry for that. Now, about the extended warranty. Mr. Halvorsen bought the extended warranty. He also bought the gap insurance. He tipped me $20 on the way out, which is not a thing that happens at car dealerships, and he said, Ma'am, whatever's happening, you handled that like a champion. Reuben, remember Reuben the bartender from the holiday party? Had called Bobby that morning. Reuben and Bobby are cousins. Small town. Dmitri was escorted out by 2 salesmen and a security guard. I did not watch him leave. I finished my paperwork. I drove home. The house was mine again. Petra had filed the forgery claim that morning, and the quitclaim was, pending review, set aside. The locks had been changed at noon by a locksmith Evanthia had on speed dial. Dimitri's things were in boxes on the lawn. On top of the boxes was the velvet box. Inside the velvet box was Yia Yia's ring. Antonella, it turned out, had given it back. Dash had approached her that morning in the parking lot of her yoga studio, and he had explained politely that the ring was stolen property, that it had been reported in a police filing that very morning, it had, and that she had approximately 1 hour to return it before a detective arrived. She returned it. She also, on her way home, left Dmitri. I held Yia Yia's ring in the driveway at 6:14 p.m. on a Tuesday in late December. It was cold. My breath fogged. The emerald caught the porch light and threw a small green freckle on my palm. I said, out loud to nobody, count the exits before you sit down. Yia Yia. Then I went inside my house, and I locked the door. Within 2 weeks, Dimitri's real estate firm let him go. They had been looking for an excuse. The frozen accounts thing, and the public scene at my dealership, gave them one. His colleagues had never liked him. He used to joke at firm parties about his barren wife. They had been polite about it. They were done being polite. Within a month, his mother, Despina, stopped taking his calls. Not because she'd developed a conscience, Despina has never had one of those, but because she was embarrassed. Despina cares about embarrassment the way cats care about closed doors. She started telling her bridge group that Dmitri had always been a little selfish. She started telling Yia Yia's old friends at the Greek church that she had tried to warn him. She began, without irony, to attend a women's support group. Within 2 months, my sister Callie showed up at my house with a pan of koularakia and a face full of mascara streaks. She stood on the porch, and she said, Marlo, I have to tell you something. I let her in. I made coffee. She told me she had kissed Dmitri once, in 2012 at our engagement party, and that he had sent her the framed photograph that same week, and that she had told him to stop, and that she had never told me because she was ashamed, and because nothing had happened, and because he had been so persuasive about keeping it quiet. She cried. Real crying. Ugly crying. I listened. I didn't say anything for a long time. Then I said, Callie, if you had told me in 2012, Thea might be alive. She said, I know. I said, I need to think about you for a while. I don't know how long. She said, I know. She left. She calls every Sunday. I don't always pick up. Sometimes I do. I think eventually I will forgive her, because she is my sister and because Yia Yia would want me to. But I am taking my time. I am done rushing. Want me to. Dmitri called me at 2:14 a.m. on a Thursday, 8 weeks after the freeze. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail. 41 seconds long, same length as the one from 2014. He said, "Marlo, baby, I know I messed up. I know I have been a bad husband. I need you to unfreeze the accounts. Just the checking. I have nowhere to live. My mother won't take me in. I'm at a Motel 6. Please, baby, I loved you. I did." I listened to it twice. Then I saved it to the same cloud drive, in the same folder, right next to the 2014 voicemail. I labeled the folder, Evidence, M. Petrakis. Then I went back to sleep. The divorce was finalized on a Friday in March. I got the house. I got half of everything he'd hidden, which came out to $89,250, plus my legal fees, plus damages. I got Yia's ring, legally this time, documented. I got my maiden name back. I am Marlo Vasilis again. Antonella, I heard, moved to Phoenix. Dimitri lives in a studio apartment in Cheyenne and works for a property management company screening tenant applications. He is not remarried. He sends me an email on every anniversary of our wedding. I have never opened one. They sit in a folder marked Other. Yia's ring is on my right hand now, not my left. My left is bare, and I like it that way. Last Sunday, I drove to Pueblo. I stood on the porch of her old house, which is owned by a young family now. The husband was grilling on a little Weber. His wife was shelling peas into a colander between her knees on the porch, just like Yia used to. I stood across the street and I watched for maybe 2 minutes. She looked up. She waved. I waved back. I drove home through the mountains with the windows down. The air smelled like pine sap and cold granite and, somewhere in a canyon, wood smoke. I stopped at a diner outside Colorado Springs and I ordered a slice of lemon meringue pie and a black coffee. The waitress's name tag said Tamsin, which made me laugh out loud because Tamsin was the woman who'd called me about the file box. Different Tamsin, different life, same world, threaded together like it likes to do. I ate the pie. I thought about Thea. I thought about the girl I had been at 20 weeks pregnant in a gray sweater in a parking lot. I thought about her, bleeding through her jeans, calling her husband who wouldn't come. I wanted to reach back through 10 years and hand her the cassette. I wanted to say, "Hold on, it's already on its way." But she figured it out herself. A quiet woman is not an empty woman. She is a lake, and lakes drown men who don't respect the shore. I paid for the pie in cash. I tipped 40%. I drove home to my house, and I slept in the middle of the bed.